While people all over the world have been struck by its stunning imprint of the face of Jesus Christ, not everyone's convinced that the shroud is a genuine holy relic.
For centuries, the Shroud of Turin was viewed primarily as an object of faith, a silent, ghostly imprint on a piece of ancient linen. But on the night of the 28th of May, 1898, it ceased to be a mere relic and became a scientific anomaly. Secondo Pia, an amateur photographer, was developing the first ever glass plate negatives of the cloth. As the image emerged in the chemical bath, Pia nearly dropped the glass in terror. What he saw was a perfect, high-contrast, positive image of a human face. This meant that the faint, brownish stains on the cloth were, in reality, a photographic negative. Think about the implications. How could a medieval forger create a flawless negative 800 years before the invention of the camera? The human eye cannot perceive the world in a negative, let alone paint it with such anatomical precision. This was the first crack in the wall of skepticism, suggesting that the shroud wasn't a work of art, but a snapshot of a single moment in time. Fast forward to 2015. Inside an ultra-clean genetics laboratory at the University of Padua, Professor Gianni Barcaccia and his team were about to perform what many called a biological autopsy of the cloth. Using sterile micro-vacuum devices, they extracted microscopic dust and organic fragments trapped deep within the weave material that had been sealed away for centuries. The team expected one of two things: a dominant European genetic fingerprint proving a medieval forgery, or a dominant Middle Eastern fingerprint proving a local relic. What they got instead sent shockwaves through the scientific community. The DNA didn't point to one person or one country. It pointed to a global journey. The Druze connection. The strongest genetic markers belong to the Druze, a historically isolated, tightly knit ethnic group found in modern-day Israel, Jordan, and Lebanon. Because the Druze rarely marry outside their community, their genetic markers act as a stable time capsule of the ancient Levant. This provided hard, biological evidence that the cloth originated in the Middle East. But then, the results grew even more complex. The team identified haplogroup L3, a lineage originating from North and East Africa, specifically Egypt and Ethiopia. This suggested that the cloth had been in direct contact with some of the earliest Christian communities on the African continent, long before it ever reached the shores of Europe. Part 3. The Silk Road and the Indian subcontinent. The most stunning revelation, however, was the presence of DNA from South and East Asia. The lab identified haplogroups M39, M56, and R8 markers, typical of the Indian subcontinent, and even markers D4 and G2, commonly associated with China. How could a 14th century French forgery contain the DNA of people from thousands of miles away? In the medieval world, globalization was non-existent. A forger in a French abbey wouldn't have access to genetic material from Tibet or the Ganges River. The answer lies in the Silk Road. For centuries, the shroud was kept in the city of Edessa, modern-day Turkey, a massive crossroads of ancient trade. Merchants from China and India carrying silks and spices would stop to venerate the image of Edessa. They touched the cloth, they kissed its casing, and they left behind microscopic traces of their presence, skin cells, and hair fragments that became part of the cloth's biological memory. The shroud isn't just a record of a man, it's a record of the entire world that came to see him. While the DNA mapped the journey, the pollen mapped the crime scene. Professor Avinoam Danan, a world-renowned botanist from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, found that the shroud was saturated with pollen from 58 different plant species. While 17 of these species are native to Europe, the vast majority are endemic to the Middle East. One species in particular stood out: Gundelia tourneforti. This is a thorny desert thistle that grows only in a narrow corridor between Jerusalem and Jericho. Most tellingly, the pollen from this specific thorn was found in massive concentrations around the head and shoulders of the man on the shroud. It blooms in early spring, exactly during the time of Passover. This botanical evidence acts as a geographic seal. A medieval forger could not have faked microscopic pollen grains that were only discovered centuries later with high-powered microscopes. Skeptics long argued that the red stains on the cloth were just red ochre or vermilion paint. However, in 2017, nanoscopic analysis using transmission electron microscopy revealed a grim reality. The stains were human blood, specifically type AB, the rarest blood group in the world. But it was the chemistry of the blood that told the true story. Scientists found extreme concentrations of creatinine and ferritin. In the medical world, these are biomarkers of catastrophic fatal trauma. They only appear in the bloodstream when a body has undergone prolonged torture, massive muscle destruction, rhabdomyolysis, and extreme dehydration. Furthermore, the blood has remained red for 2,000 years because of high levels of bilirubin. When a person is under extreme stress, the liver floods the body with bilirubin, which acts as a permanent red stabilizer for bloodstains. A painter could imitate the look of blood, but no artist in history could reproduce the specific biochemical signature of a man dying in hypovolemic shock. For decades, the world believed the mystery was solved. In 1988, 3 prestigious laboratories in Oxford, Zurich, and Arizona performed carbon-14, dating on a small snippet of the shroud. The verdict was definitive. The fabric dated between 1260 and 1390 AD. The shroud was declared a medieval forgery, and the case was closed in the eyes of the mainstream media. But science is not a static destination. It is a journey of constant correction. 3 decades later, researchers uncovered a critical flaw in the 1988 sampling. The piece of fabric used for the test, roughly the size of a postage stamp, was taken from the very edge of the cloth. This specific corner had been handled by thousands of hands over centuries, and more importantly, it had been expertly repaired. Chemist Ray Rogers discovered that this corner was a patch woven into the original linen by the Poor Clare nuns after a fire in the Middle Ages. They used a technique called invisible reweaving, blending newer cotton threads with the original ancient linen. The laboratories didn't date the shroud, they dated a medieval repair. In 2022, a new breakthrough emerged that bypassed the problem of contamination. Dr. Liberato De Caro used a technique called wide-angle X-ray scattering, WAXIS, to examine the aging of the linen cellulose at an atomic level. As linen ages, its polymer chains naturally break down due to environmental factors like humidity and temperature. This process acts as an internal, unforgeable clock. When De Caro compared the molecular structure of the shroud to fabrics of known ages, the results were stunning. The shroud did not match medieval textiles. Instead, its structural degradation matched linen recovered from the fortress of Masada in Israel, which dates back to the 1st century AD, the exact time of Jesus of Nazareth. Perhaps the most frustrating part for modern scientists is the image itself. It is not a painting. There are no brushstrokes, no ink, and no pigments. The image only exists on the outermost 200 nanometers of the fibers, hundreds of times thinner than a human hair. It is a chemical transformation caused by a sudden burst of energy that scorched the surface of the linen. Scientists at Italy's National Energy Agency, ENEA, spent years trying to replicate this effect. They found that only a massive, high-intensity pulse of vacuum ultraviolet radiation could create a similar marking. This is technology that did not exist in the 14th century, and frankly, we struggle to apply it across such a large area today. To create this image, the body would have had to release a burst of light lasting less than a billionth of a second, powerful enough to mark the cloth but precise enough not to burn it. This isn't biology, it's high-energy physics. In 1976, NASA scientists discovered that the shroud contains accurate 3D information. In a regular photograph, the intensity of light depends on the color of the object. On the shroud, the intensity of the scorch depends exactly on the distance between the body and the cloth. Digital analysis even identified small, circular shapes over the eyes. These shapes match the dimensions of leptons, rare coins, minted under Pontius Pilate around 29 AD. A medieval forger would have had no way of knowing about these specific, obscure coins, let alone the ability to print their microscopic details onto linen using a method that doesn't use ink. Every detail on the shroud aligns with the brutal reality of Roman crucifixion. The nails pass through the wrists, not the palms, exactly where they would need to be to support a body's weight. The thumbs are retracted into the palms, a known physiological response to the median nerve being struck by a nail. We see the bloodstains from the crown of thorns, the spear wound in the side, and the 120 lash marks from a Roman flagrum. It is a biological archive of a moment that altered human history. While we have touched on the physical trauma, We must look deeper into the side wound, a detail that many medical professionals find to be the most chilling proof of the shroud's authenticity. Located between the fifth and sixth ribs, there is a large elliptical wound that measures roughly 4.4 centimeters by 1.1 centimeters. In a world before modern anatomy, a forger would likely have painted a simple bloodstain, but the shroud reveals a sophisticated medical reality. Forensic pathologists have identified two distinct fluids leaking from this wound: blood and water. In medical terms, this is a post-mortem flow of concentrated red blood cells and clear pericardial fluid, the fluid surrounding the heart. This only occurs when a person has died of heart failure or extreme physical shock and is then pierced by a sharp object after death. The angle of the entry suggests a soldier standing on the ground, thrusting upward into a suspended body. This matches the Roman military technique of the percussion, intended to ensure the victim was deceased. The level of medical detail here is so advanced that it wasn't even understood by physicians in the 14th century. To find this biochemical scream recorded on a piece of linen is like finding a modern medical chart in a cave from the Iron Age. In the late 1970s, during high-resolution digital processing of the image, researchers noticed a strange, circular indentation over the right eye of the man on the shroud. At first, it was dismissed as a weave defect. However, as imaging technology improved, letters and symbols began to emerge. The symbols were identified as a lituon, a staff used by Roman priests surrounded by Greek letters. This matches a very specific coin, the lepton of Pontius Pilate, minted in Judea between 29 AD and 31 AD. But here's the most mind-blowing detail. The letters on the shroud were spelled UCAI instead of UKI. Skeptics initially called this a mistake that proved the shroud was a fake. Years later, archaeologists discovered actual physical leptons from that era that carried the exact same spelling error, UCAI. A medieval forger would have needed to be a master archaeologist, a numismatist, and an expert in first-century Roman minting errors to include a detail that was invisible to the naked eye for nearly 2,000 years. This coin wasn't painted on. Its three-dimensional presence was captured in the same mysterious energy burst that created the rest of the image. Perhaps the most controversial and exciting frontier of shroud research is the quantum resurrection theory. Physicists like Dr. Paolo di Lazzaro have struggled to find a source of energy in nature that could scorch the linen without burning it. They eventually turned to vacuum ultraviolet radiation. But some theoretical physicists take it a step further. They propose that the image was formed by a process called event horizon imaging. According to this theory, the body in the tomb became mechanically transparent. For a split second, the laws of gravity and solid matter were suspended. As the body collapsed into a vacuum state, it released a massive, coherent burst of light, similar to a laser imprinting the cloth as it fell through the space where the body had been. This would explain why the image is perfectly focused and why it shows 3D depth. It wasn't a chemical reaction to a dead body. It was a photographic record of a physical transformation. This moves the shroud out of the realm of religious relic and into the realm of quantum anomaly. It suggests that we are looking at the physical evidence of a state of matter that modern science is only beginning to hypothesize. With all this evidence, the DNA from across the globe, the first-century pollen, the 3D encoding, and the medical precision, why isn't the Shroud of Turin accepted as a proven fact? The answer lies in the paradigm crisis. If science accepts the shroud as authentic, it must also accept that an event occurred which violates the known laws of physics. For many in the academic community, it is safer to stay silent or to cling to the outdated 1988 carbon-14 data than to acknowledge a discovery that would require rewriting every textbook in existence. The shroud challenges the comfort of our modern world. It tells us that we don't know as much as we think we do. It tells us that history is deeper, stranger, and more connected than our maps suggest. The global DNA on the cloth proves that humanity has been crossing paths and sharing secrets for millennia, and that even a simple carpenter from Galilee could leave a biological footprint that reaches from the gates of China to the heart of Africa. The Shroud of Turin continues to be the most studied artifact in human history, and yet it remains our greatest mystery. What do you think? Is the global DNA on the cloth proof of its travels along the Silk Road? Or is there a deeper, more supernatural explanation for why the whole world is written on this linen? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this journey into the heart of the Shroud's secrets, please like this video and subscribe to Digital Discovery. We are dedicated to uncovering the codes and mysteries that define our world. Thanks for watching.